All right, folks, we're back with episode 3 of Raising the WitchBorn, and today we're going to be covering the elf basics. And as per usual, I'm joined by Corey, who is still in Maui, living it up like a boss. Corey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I've only put in 6 hours of work so far today, so I am doing a little stuff here. The fun stuff is I'm doing some writing. I never get away, and it's always, filling orders and that kind of stuff. So get away and do a little writing for new stuff for next year. So
yes. Excellent. So yeah, like we were saying, this is going to be part of the basics series. So this week we're actually be covering the elves. So last week we covered the dwarves. We talked about how they're kind of surly and hardy and really hard to kill based upon certain builds. With the elves, I don't want to say that they're hard to kill. They're hard to hit. If you build them right, they can be almost impossible to lock down and actually get some swings on them.
Yeah, they are really crafty and, out of the box, they are great at missile combat. So, you get to put some distance between you and your opponents and you don't want to get locked up in melee too often.
Right. So I guess, yeah, we could just jump right into it, kind of going through the different forms of the elves. So as usual, let's go ahead and start off right with the leader.
Yeah. So you've got your seeker, and I guess, there's a couple things you got to think about when you're thinking about elves. They have the least variation in warrior types of any war clan. And part of that reason is they all come with an innate skill or some innate magic that they can use. And that's kind of the fun of creating a new elf war clan, right? You get to roll a D66 and see where that takes you. The leader is pretty basic. You're going to see that he is one of the strongest. So if you're going to have a melee guy, it's either going to be your leader and or your sentinel. Those are the guys right out of the box that are melee ready. Everybody else is pretty squishy at a 2 strength, but almost every elf is a 4 agility, which is well above average. So,
right. So pretty much every elf is more than well enough equipped to shoot a bow.
Definitely. And I'm going to encourage you to get bows in their hands as fast as you can. You can't believe how many people want to play elves and don't give them the tools to succeed. You're already better at missiles, get them the best missiles. And elves are one of the faster war clans that you're going to play. So they're all at a 7 speed. So last week when we were talking about how to get past the 5 speed with dwarves, some of the dwarves, now we're talking 7 speed with these guys. So you're moving faster, you're charging farther, and when you get into the advanced rules, if you ever get a speed bump up to 8, that allows you more shots or melee attacks per turn as well. So it's a really sweet spot. You love playing elves for that reason.
Yes, very much so.
Now your leader, he doesn't start with much, right? He starts with the command skill, which is going to come in handy in battle. He can lend rerolls to the war clan, same as the Dwarven Jarl last week. But all elves start with the fairy trait. And on the surface, fairy doesn't seem like much. I mean, you see better. But it's really, Tim, I would say if this was a science fiction game rather than a fantasy game, the elves would be the aliens. They're so different from all the other war clans, and fairy is part of that. Fairy trait is part of that. Elves are not mortal, so they're spirits that come from a place we call the other world, and they manifest a body in our world, and they can take any shape and any look that they want. And as a result of having this fairy trait, when they get an arm lopped off or a spear through the eye or anything like that, they can heal themselves in the matter of one game. Your character will miss one game, and they'll be back to normal. Death's a little different story, but that's where the fairy trait is so huge. So you're not collecting these war wounds and all these horrible things that kind of pile up on war clans if they don't have enough healing.
Right. After a while, I mean, if you take enough wounds with any other war clan out there, it might reach a point where you just want to start retiring characters because of the fact they can't move, they're missing arms, they're missing an eye, like their face is all mangled.
Yeah, it can get really ugly. The elves, they're the pretty boys. They they stay in really good health for a long, long time, and that's part of that charm of having that fairy ability. And then the last thing that your seeker, that's the name of your leader, the last thing your seeker has is that fairy power. And let's see if I can hold it up to the screen. There's kind of a table of all the unique skills or magic that your guy can start with. And you don't know until you generate your war clan what you're going to have. Right. And if you're a really lucky roller and you roll 61 to 66, then your elf could be some kind of unique fae, from pixies to dryads to brownies to spriggans to sylphs. They're all great. There's nothing bad in there. There's some that you may not want your leader to be, but you have no control.
Right, exactly. So that's always one of the beauties when you're making a war clan, especially when you're looking at war clans like this, where with the dwarves, they don't really have that option. It's like a dwarf is a dwarf is a dwarf is a dwarf. At that point, you just have to say, okay, this is the dwarf I'm buying. This is what I'm equipping him with. With elves and a couple others that we'll touch on later, they all have common traits, but at the same time, they could end up vastly different from what you thought they were going to be just based upon the powers they get. Or, in this case, like they become a fae. So they're not even elves, they're fae. So, you end up with a spriggan, which is, a big deal, especially the fact that they can grow and get all nasty and everything else.
Yeah, you got it. Exactly. So your leader is going to kind of be shaped by your role, and he might become a support guy. He might become, better at missile combat, better at melee, and a lot of that's going to be determined by that fairy power that you start with. So it's really, until you create that war clan, you don't know exactly what you have. That's part of the excitement of playing elves.
Right. So taking all that into consideration, all elves could potentially, if you roll crazy, be fairies off the bat. Yeah. They're not even elves. You could end up with a whole fairy force.
All unique fae, and yeah, it could be very unusual. The odds are basically 1 in 6, right? So if you start with 8 guys, you're going to get 1 or 2. But I've seen people, really lucky rollers, like you say, start with maybe 4 fae, and it's like, wow, okay.
It totally changes the way this is being done.
Yeah, it really changes your outlook. So you can't necessarily go in with a set mindset on how you're going to spend your 35 gold on your elves, for when you initially equip them. You got to kind of wait and see what you're going to get.
Right, which makes perfect sense. So, yeah, I guess past that, let's kind of go down the list. So we've got the Seeker, which is your leader, and they're a commander. Just like every elf, they have fairy and the fairy power. So yeah. We touched upon fairy. What exactly is the fairy power? Now, this one, I know you roll on the chart, but this is a special ability that every elf may or may not get.
Yeah, and it's really a random thing. I'm just reading off the table here, but you can get the plant singer skill. You can have the ability to climb. You can glamour things that will allow you to resell broken things for more money. And it goes on, and they gradually get better and better as you go on. Serendipity is free rerolls for your war clan. You can sleep monsters and other warriors, which is huge. Like you're a starting war clan and the troll comes out. You don't want to mess with the troll. I mean, yeah, you might be able to shoot it, but it's going to regenerate and do everything else. Why not just put it to sleep? So
Right.
that's a great skill. Eldritch Fire is little green orbs of fire that the elves draw from the other world, and they can hurl them huge distances, and they do great damage. There's a skill called Guardian, which increases your strength. You can shadow walk. You can turn invisible with the unseen skill. So lots of great stuff that's going to kind of shape where your guy is.
Right. Excellent. So, we kind of talked a little bit about the fact that your Seeker and your Sentinel are kind of your melee centric, if you want to call it that. Obviously, if you end up with certain builds by rolling Fae, that can change the way that some of these will operate. But straight chart, your Seeker and your Sentinel are your two melee centric elves.
And don't make the mistake of trying to make them just like the other elves. A lot of people do that. And I would, like you're saying, lean that towards making those guys your melee guys. You need somebody who can go in and clean up quick, You can't do everything from 20 inches away.
Right, exactly. So speaking of 20 inches away, that is where your Warden comes into it.
Yeah. Warden are by far the best missile guys in the game. And you want to get two of them as soon as you can. That's the max. And they start with this great skill called First Strike. And without getting into how the initiative works in the game, basically any new round, your wardens can say, I want to go first before anybody else does. And so you've got a horde of orcs charging you, and you know that you get 2 to 3 bow shots at them with both your guys before they ever get to take a turn. It's a really devastating skill.
Right. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, because I know that the first few times that we played, and even I actually ran into it when we played that group battle at Adepticon, that First Strike, at first you overlook it is the best way to put it. You overlook it. You're like, oh, okay, so he'll get one pot shot at me before I close in on him, so he better hope he hits me well. And then you realize it's like, oh no, he just chooses to completely activate first and can, sequentially mow down 2 to 3 models before they get to him, depending upon how much he's skilled up and what equipment he's got and everything else. Like at level 0, a Warden can be really nasty in that way.
Yeah, you got it. That is really a huge advantage.
Yes, and then we have the Baron and the Watcher are kind of, I guess you want to call it, your two run-of-the-mill elves.
Yeah, they're kind of the filler. The Baron especially. That's your brand new elf, just new to the world, and she's just trying to figure out where she fits in, and a lot of that's going to depend on that fairy power, right? It's
right.
And it's kind of the same thing with Watchers. Like people get, oh, I got to add a Watcher, and it's like, well, you don't know, that Watcher may be a Dryad, or that Watcher may be a Pixie or something, and you're going to be really, really happy. So it's your least expensive elves, and to meet the requirement of 8 for 90 gold, you need those in there.
Right. Awesome. So yeah, we've got those. We've got the Baron, we got the Watcher, Warden and Sentinel. Obviously, we just covered those. Your Sentinel has the shield skill, so he's going to go up and he's going to be able to protect himself. I'm not going to say that he's going to be as good as a dwarf, but I mean, at level 0, kind of comparable in a way.
Yeah. They're, because the game has no hit points, they're, it's pretty much how you equip them after that. If he can be as tough as a dwarf. A dwarf's always going to have that stout skill, which is a little bit of an advantage.
Right.
But your elf can get there. The other thing that people always overlook, we talked last week about, the shield skill and how important that is, because that blocks 1/3 of, those blows that can hit your character. Elves all have easy access to the parry skill. So that's the other side of it, right? You can block any parry hits. So that's another 1/3. So that Sentinel has easy access to blocking everything but critical hits. So, And it's a skill that people overlook. They'd much rather spend money on real expensive armor. And I'm like, why not make it easy on yourself? If you can take away 2/3 of the things that are going to hit you.
Right. When people only have a 16.6% chance of actually hitting you every time, yes, that hits critical. Take that into consideration. But the fact that their chances right off the bat are so low when you pair those two together, it gets pretty crazy.
Yeah. Parry's one of the most overlooked easy skills to get. And if you're an elf, there's so much subtlety written into the rules, and it'll take you a while to figure out your best ways to put these things together. But that's a big one.
Yeah. So the other one I want to talk about definitely, because we've touched on it a little bit. Now, obviously, with Enter Perdition, you don't have the physical book of the spell book, which, again, future releases, everything else is their spell singer. So this to me is particularly nasty because most of the spellcasters in the game, they only have access to maybe one element right off the bat.
Right.
They have access to, sky and water are considered to be one, but they have access to two elements, plus they have fairy and the potential to have fairy powers on top of it. They have very, very potent spellcasters because of that.
Yeah, they tend to be some of the toughest in the game, and they have a 4 psyche, which is the highest any spellcaster starts with. So basically, if the spell needs a roll to make it successful, on a 3+, you're going to succeed. So it's just incredible. And then there are skills that your spellcaster can earn that kind of stack with that too. One of the big ones is a skill called Weird, and it's spelled WYRD. And what that does is it gives you 5 choices, basically. I'm going to draw my inner strength and lower my ability scores by 2 points, but I can either hit automatically, I could extend the range of a spell much farther than it was intended to be cast, I can increase the target radius. So if I'm casting a spell that normally affects only one opponent, I can double that and make it 2. Or if it does an area of effect, I can increase the area of effect. I can increase damage with the Weird, and I can increase my injury roll with the Weird. So it's one of those things. If I'm willing to draw on my inner strength, I can just annihilate people.
Right. So, and it's definitely a good stack to have. It was actually when I was going to mention, especially with the Elven spellcasters, the fact that in a way that it allows them to give themselves automatic modifiers to their rolls. So, I need to do more damage. Okay, I can weaken myself. I need to make sure that I hit. I can weaken myself. But make sure that, but at the same time, make sure that when you do this, it's going to have a good effect. I mean, yes, obviously there's always dice involved, so there's always a chance something could go wrong. But that's also where, keeping that sentinel close by is probably a really good idea as well.
Yeah.
So
we had a game where we finally caught up to a spellcaster who had been using Weird too much. And when we finally got to her, she was pretty much 1 in all her stats. And so she went down like that. But the havoc that she caused on a couple other war clans until that time.
Yeah, it's a very permanent ability, but like I said, make sure that when you do it, it's worth it.
Oh, one huge thing I forgot to mention about the spell singer is elves have innate magic, and so unlike all other spellcasters, she doesn't need spell components to cast spells.
Right.
It's something that she sings. And for a brand new war clan, that's 2 gold that you don't have to spend right away. She can be casting spells out of the box without the need to buy those spell components.
Right. So I guess kind of touching back on that, we didn't really touch on it too much in the dwarves. We talked about their healing magics. However, for spell casting, this is kind of the first time we're really bringing it up as an aside topic, which is great to add to the elves because they have such a potent magical ability. You have to buy your spells just like you would anything else. So at your level 0, you have to buy from the first tier of spells,
Yes.
and then from there unless you're elves, you have to buy spell components. So you're looking, in order to make a spellcaster right out of the gate, 3 gold, period. So, and when you're, again, talking only potentially 35 gold left for your war clan to do what it needs to do, that can seem like a pretty hefty hit right off the bat.
Yeah. Whereas you can start out a spell singer for 1 gold, just buy that first spell and she can cast it right away. So,
right. So, and one of the other things I wanted to kind of touch on too, since we are talking a lot of shooting and magic involved with the elves, a lot of their skills are very spell-like in their abilities.
Yes, yeah, and there's quite a few good ones. Let me just flip through real quick. You've got Changeling is a big one if you've got Fae. That allows some of the characters to change from something that looks like an elf into other creatures. That's where your thing like the Spriggan comes into play. Or if you get a Dinshinkus, they can actually shape change into different animal forms. So that's something to look forward. But some of the more common ones that everybody can get is something like Charm. Doesn't seem like a big deal, maybe not one that you would take right away, but as long as you're not the first one to make an attack, you don't start the fight, no one can ever target you. So you can just kind of hang back in sort of a support role and kind of know that you're safe until you take that big bow shot or blast off a spell or something like that. So it's a great defense. There is Eldritch Fire, which we touched on a little. That's throwing these orbs of little green fire up to 20 paces across the battle map, and it does a heck of a lot of damage. It's
a +8 damage for those of you out there listening.
Yeah. And it's psyche based, so elves tend to be some of the smarter one of the smarter war clans as well. And so you've got about a 50-50 chance until you level up and increase that psyche as you go along. Entangle is a hugely overlooked spell, kind of innate magic. And what that does is it kind of delays your opponent's turn. You can entangle somebody up to long range away. They're kind of tied up in vines. They'll break out, but they won't get their turn until everybody else on the board does. They kind of break out last. So while they're tied up, everybody gets bonus attack die against them, whether they're shooting them or hitting them in melee. And so that's where you can take your Sentinel and your Seeker and kind of come in and pound on the guy before he gets to take a turn.
Yeah, so in a case like that, with Entangle, they actually go after models that are stunned and staggered.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's exactly the right strategy with those guys is you weaken an opponent with your long range shots, and then you have your Seeker and your Sentinel come in and be the cleanup squad. And it's a little known fact of the game, but it actually favors melee a little bit more the way the rules are written. And so you kind of need to take advantage of some of those bonuses for stunned characters and that kind of stuff with your melee guys. You'll wound more people and earn shadow faster.
Yeah, very true. So we haven't really touched on that yet, but I figure later on when we talk about some of the more in-depth combat tactics, that's something to definitely bring up. So yeah, I guess touching on all that, the elves themselves, even in their skills, are very magical in what they can do. Where, dwarves, again, we're talking defense. Elves kind of have mess with you skills is, I guess, the best way for me to put it.
It really does. And one of my favorite mess with you skills is called Starfire. And you can either earn this, some elves will start with it, or you can get a Starfire wand. And I get so many players saying, Corey, why would I ever want Starfire? It doesn't really do anything for me. all it does is it makes my agility better. I light this guy up. Now my agility is better than him. My agility is already better than him. Well, as you start playing and maybe playing with some of the more advanced rules, there's penalties that might penalize your elf, and so he'll have an equal agility. So instead of rolling 2 attack dice for a higher agility, he'll only be rolling 1. So you want to Starfire is a free action. You can just start lighting people up every turn, and why not do it just in case you need it? But then where it really starts to come into play is, let's say I'm playing a game with Tim and Nick. We're playing a 3-player game, and I'm just starfiring all Tim's guys. Who is Nick more likely to shoot, me or Tim, who's all lit up?
Right, exactly. Because it's I guess if you want to call it a neutral ability at that point, because now that I am all lit up, I'm easier for everybody on the board to hit, not just you.
Right, and that's where it really comes into play. I might not even attack you. I might just light your guys up and direct Nick towards you so that I can go and complete my objective in the game.
Right, which makes sense. It's a very good bait and switch tool.
Yeah. And it's one that every elf should have as soon as you can get. You need a couple guys with Starfire. It can really be a game changer.
Yes, very much so. So one of the other big master skills I really wanted to kind of bring up is elves have access to a master skill called Wish.
Can you imagine how many fights have happened in the development of this game over that Wish skill?
I kind of figured as much, because after reading it, I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah, it's it's one of the things that you got to make it fair, because there is no game master. There's no final arbiters to kind of say this is what it can do. So what we really have narrowed it down to is a wish is kind of, for most elves, when you get that skill, you can do 1 wish a day. The exception is the leprechaun. If you're lucky enough to get the Fae leprechaun, you can cast 3 wishes a day.
That was actually going to be the one that I mentioned.
Yeah, that is the guy to get. But what it allows you to do is boost an ability score, right? Like, I'm sitting here with my 2 strength elves, and I know Tim has a 5 strength ogre. I can't take on the 5 strength ogre in melee, but I can wish that I was as strong as any other warrior on the board. So now I am as strong as that ogre. It kind of neutralizes that nasty little ability or advantage that Tim has. And then the other thing you can do is wish for any basic or expert skill. And if you guys have flipped through kind of the back of the rule books, there are so many basic and expert skills, I don't know, neighborhood of 75. There's some little advantage if you're smart, and people who have a wish spend hours sitting there going, okay, next time I play so-and-so, I'm going to wish for this skill because that's going to neutralize his biggest advantage. And so it's kind of that, for a lack of a better word, it's that wild card skill, right? I can fix any deficiency I have with my war clan with a few wishes.
Yes. And then there's the third and final, which I find to be the dirty one.
You take that one, Tim.
All right. So the third option for the wish is you can wish for something cruel. So in melee, wish an opposing warrior's ability score down to 1. This lasts the adventure and can't be modified upward. This is one situation where magic may be cast in melee. So in this case, if you are going against, say, that super nasty dwarf that has statted himself up to bejesus and back, and his defense is ridiculous, you can go, yep, you know what? That Jarl's defense is a 1. And there's nothing they can do about it. It's a 1. So obviously his armor's still going to operate.
Or a
All
20
that's
down to a 1. Oh.
yes. So it gets really gross really fast because it's everything. That whole stat just goes.
And you can hear the screams of anger when that happens.
Yes.
And there's a good chance your guy who just cast the wish is going to be the target of dwarves.
Yeah, because at that point, like, that guy's dead. I'm killing him. Like, there's no question about it. He's got to go. So because the nasty part of it is, especially targeting defense, because all of your skills and armor and everything are added into that basic score. Dropping it to a 1 drops it to a 1.
Yeah.
If I'm correct on that. So, like, if your armor is 20.
Correct.
Yeah. So if your armor is like 20 because you've got like dragon plate and, you know, you boosted your defense and all these extra defensive skills, 1.
Now, dwarves do have one thing that might save them. They are resistant to magic. So most dwarves are stupid. So they'd have like a 2 psyche, so they'd need a 5 or better on a d6 roll to resist that magic. And, you know, it has been done, but it's both ways. It is really tricky. But when you're up against orcs or anybody else, most people don't have resistant like the dwarves do, and that wish for something cruel is quite often used.
Yeah, because every time I see that, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so if I end up with a leprechaun, I'm going to be doing my damnedest to make sure that at some point he gets the Elven Master skill of Wish so he can just cause havoc on the battlefield. And now I'm going to keep him protected. He's going to stay way over here, away from everybody as much as humanly possible.
Right.
But when I get him up in there, he's going to cause havoc. You know, even if it is a combination of boost this ability score to match the ogre, or, you know, if you come across a couple of the later adventures and you've got some really, really, really nasty WitchBorn, when you're like, oh yeah, that WitchBorn running around on the field out there, yeah, I'm going to match his strength. Suddenly you become just as dangerous as that NPC running around the board terrorizing everybody. Yeah, so you have like this really nasty combination, especially if you end up with that leprechaun with Wish, of just one, you're going to have to protect that leprechaun. They're not very good at staying alive. But 2, if you manage to like make this protective bubble of elves around him and get him up in there, there is no telling what havoc he will cause. And because of the potency of Wish as it is, they can kind of choose what they do on a whim. So if they don't need to drop somebody's defense or don't need to drop somebody's attack, or they don't, you know, they don't need to be cruel, they could just go, you know what, this round my Seeker is now just as powerful as that WitchBorn over there. Next round, my Sentinel is just as powerful as that WitchBorn that just killed 2 of your people. And so it's a nasty boost, it's a nasty nerf, or it's a way to, you know, with the middle option, really say, you know what, I need this skill, I haven't quite got there. Let's just go ahead and give it to the person that needs it.
Right. There's 2 great stacks for Wish too. One of them is Shadow Walk. So what that allows you to do is briefly step into the other world and reappear back in Perdition. You can move up to 12 paces anywhere you want to go on the battle map. So that's how you can sneak in and be in position to do that wish. The other thing you can do is use that as a getaway tool, because you know you are going to be the target. You can evade out of combat without penalty with the Shadow Walk. And then the other thing that I've seen is Wish and Weird combined. So normally a Wish only affects one guy. You get 2 guys within reach of you. Use your Weird. Now Wish affects 2 of your guys. So now 2 of them are that amazing strength. So it is probably, Wish and Weird is probably the most powerful combination in the game.
Right.
You can do.
Right. So keep in mind, folks, like, I know we're talking about this and it sounds, you know, even after playing the game, and obviously Corey being the creator, like, he's saying how nasty this ability is. Keep in mind, these are both master skills. So you're not just going to wind up with these after one random game. Like, this is going to take some time to build up to be able to do what it is that we're talking about here. This is not something that you just end up with like 3 games in.
This is 25 to 30 games with the same.
Yeah, but once it gets there, disgusting.
And by then they'll know how much trouble you are anyway, Tim, and they'll be scouting for your key guy, trying to take him out before he even gets the wish off.
Yeah, my shadow walking wishful leprechaun. So that's exactly that's exactly how that stack would go. All right. So yeah, we've covered a lot of the elven abilities. We've talked about the fact that they are very potent spellcasters, even on top of the fact that they do have innate magical abilities built into their skills. The one thing that we haven't really got into yet is their equipment. So we're going to touch on that, but there's one thing I want to point out is that elves have access to adamant.
Yes. Adamant is a substance from the other world that is totally malleable but unbreakable. And so when you get a oops with your adamant blade, it can't snap. That is huge. When you have adamant armor, that is the best armor that you're ever going to get. The sad thing for elves is they've lost the memory of how to create adamant. And so everything that you find that's made out of adamant is very rare because it's something that was made long ago and you just happen to come across it.
Right. So we haven't really touched on that, and I think this is a good time to touch on it. It actually has a rare rating of 6.
Right. So what that means is, let's say I saved up my 15 gold and I want to buy that adamant blade. I don't automatically get it. I need to roll a 6-sided and roll a 6 or higher with modifiers just to have a chance at getting that adamant blade. And I only get one roll after every adventure, so you could be sitting on that money for a good long time, hoping. And basically what this is saying in behind the scenes, your elves are scouring the land for any sign of adamant weapons and adamant armor, and you just haven't uncovered any yet. But when you do make that 6, and there's players who roll 6 anytime they want, it's just amazing.
There's always those people.
I'm the guy who 20 games in, it's like, I got my adamant blade. I'm so happy, but that's sort of the ultimate sword in the game. That's the one you want. It's faster and lighter, so it gets more attacks per turn. It does more damage. It does better injuries, and it's unbreakable. So what's not to like?
Right. So, and then there's the ranged version of that, which is the Nemesis bow at 20 gold pieces. This thing's disgusting.
Yeah, it is. It just loads you up with some really useful skills. Big ones being marksman and keen aim and sharpshooter. And again, another unbreakable bow. There's nothing worse than spending 9 gold on a long bow and it snaps during a battle. This one's safe.
Right. So it definitely has an advantage there.
The thing that I always tell people, and they don't catch on right away, just a basic tactic is wardens have easy access to those skills that the Nemesis bow provides. So give it to your Watcher or your Bairn or somebody else if you get that Nemesis bow, because those are all skills that would be master skills for those guys to earn. And so I always see everyone, I'm going to give the Warden the Nemesis bow because he's my coolest guy. And it's like, why not have 2 cool guys?
Right.
Give your Warden a long bow and give your Nemesis bow to a guy who's not as cool.
Right. So aside from the special traits of keen aim, marksman, and sharpshooter, obviously it's an adamant bow. It's unbreakable. We already talked about that. Statistically, there is no difference between the Nemesis bow and the long bow. So if your Warden is already moving along that path, there's absolutely there's no reason to give him the Nemesis bow. Like you're saying, you give it to your Bairn, you give it to your Watcher, you give it to somebody other than the Warden.
Yeah, you want to you don't want a superhero. You want as many guys to just be as scary as they can be.
Right. Because if any one of them drops at any time, you need the others to be able to, back him up or kind of fill his role. You don't ever want to have just that one super cool guy that just goes out there, gets shot in the face, and is dead.
And I think the other thing to point out on the Nemesis bow is it's not one that you can start with. Any rare item, you can't start your war clan around that. So it's something that you're going to save for. You can start out with the long bows. You can start out with short bows. So those are all starting weapons.
Right. So, and then we get into some of the ammo that goes along with it. So, for example, in this case, Elder arrows.
Yeah, there are some really great arrows. You happen to pick out the most expensive there. But basically, those warp wooden stuff. So you got a guy messing with you, and you hit him with your Elder arrow. It can horribly bend his lance, polearm, spear, staff, or shield, extinguish his torch. His cart, chariot, raft, or robot, boat, or wagon is unusable the rest of the game. Even wooden artifacts cease to work. So it's kind of a trick arrow. It's like there's a dwarf war clan we play against who they're all heavily armored up, and they ride around in their wagon to get places faster. Right. And then jump off and wreak havoc on the elves, right? So you see it.
You don't even have to shoot the dwarf.
Shoot the wagon. You shoot the wagon, and you've taken out half of his plan right there. Orcs on chariots works great against orcs on chariots. Something you're going to want. The main thing that you're going to want, anybody that you give a bow to, give them the extra ammo. That's the cheapest way to reload. You don't want to be walking around with a 9 gold piece longbow and not have extra ammo, because one bad oops, especially early on, and you're not shooting any more of that game until you can buy some new arrows. So always carry extra ammo or hunting arrows if you can afford them. They're a little bit more, but they do a nice little +1 to injury. When it gets in there, it just tears up your mortal victims a little bit worse.
Yeah, and then of course there's the one slightly nastier than the hunting arrows, which are the signature arrows. So the hunting arrows, by the way, are still a rare. So for those listening, this is not something you could start with. So you might as well just go ahead and spend the extra gold. Say 10 gold to get a longbow. Just that way you get the longbow and the extra ammo right off the bat. However, later on, getting hunting arrows to do that little extra damage. Signature arrows cost a little bit more, but they're pretty good on their own. I mean, you have to be at least level 3 to even buy them.
Yeah.
So,
and these are one kind of like Starfire. Don't forget you've got them.
Right, exactly. So with these, they use in any bow, but when the arrow wounds an opposing warrior, his comrades. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the description here. His comrades are filled with dread after recognizing your fairy's distinctive flexions. Their route feats are penalized by -3. In anyone else's hands, these function as hunting arrows. So these are like I'm still trying to figure out exactly how these work. This is basically an arrow with your name on it.
Yeah,
it's really what it is.
Tim the Kid, or whatever you name your elf, is famed archer. And he's got these very distinctive fletchings on his arrow. And when you see one of those arrows sticking out of your buddy, it's like, oh my God, we're facing him.
Yeah.
And so it triggers, when it triggers a route feat, it's extra bad news. Our record we had a few weeks ago, a new elf is probably gonna route on a 6-sided. He's gonna have to roll a 4 or better, so probably a 50-50 chance that he might route. Our record with really experienced war clans the other week was we got the negative modifier up to a -9. So even though this guy, these elves were facing off against orcs in this game, even though the orcs all had really good route feats, like they needed to roll anything but a 1 on a 6-sided dice. All of them were failing because of this -9 modifier.
Ooh, that's crazy. Wow. So yeah, that pretty much, I mean, covers the elves. Now there's a couple other things. Obviously, they've got their armor. There's an adamant armor. We already discussed how amazing adamant is. So the one thing that I've noticed that's different from the elves, from the other war clans, at least for the most part, is the fact that they don't really have a mount.
Flip to the last page.
Flip to the last page. What am I missing here? I'm probably missing something big.
You're missing.
Oh yeah, there they are. Yep. So never mind anything I just said. They have it looks like 6 mounts.
Yeah, there's they have some of the most unique mounts in the game. So the palfrey is good for archers. It gives you it has a nice smooth gait, allows you to shoot from its back without earning a skill. The stag is just, a great deer, a great red deer, and that is basically for some of the smaller fae that can't ride a horse. Like Tim might have his leprechaun and want to ride the battle from the back of his stag. Don't underestimate a stag. They're actually pretty good. Their greatest natural mount is the striking horse. Only paladins have access to a striking horse. And it's just an extremely fast horse with some great skills as far as being able to trample in battle. It has that first strike that we were talking about with the wardens, too.
Right.
That's why it's the striking horse. So it can make that seeker or your sentinel into a killer from horseback. And then the biggies. Do not make all your elves male. If you have a female elf, she can ride a unicorn. It's very expensive and very rare, but they also have the first strike skill. They can shadow walk, so they can zip into the other world and reappear up to 12 paces away. They're great scouts, and they are considered fairies, so they heal kind of the same way as your elves do. The last one is not as expensive as the unicorn, but it's unique. It's the Xanthan Steed. And in game terms, it's almost like it can be invisible. It makes its rider invisible. So it's another great one to get. But again, very expensive at 28 gold. And you can only have one in your war clan. Whereas if you have all female elves, they can all ride into battle on their unicorns if they so choose.
Right. So, and one thing that I was also going to mention here, because I haven't not seen this chart, folks. So, like, even though like I've read a lot on the elves, I know what they do. I have yet to run into it, so I had no idea that it had all these options. This is all new to me. But one of the things that really sticks out is like the Xanthan Steed. It actually gives it grants the unseen skill, so it can literally move around stealth-like. On top of that, for an additional 18 gold, you could buy camo barding, which allows this thing to basically also give it the conceal skill.
So even when it does appear,
it's still harder to see.
It's still harder to see than anything else. Yeah. So the elves are, I wouldn't put every elf on a mount, but a few well-placed mounts can really mobilize your already fast war clan, and a spell singer on a unicorn is just, you don't even want to deal with it. We've got one in our beta test group that is about a 10th level spell singer on a unicorn, and she is a nightmare.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's almost no stopping her at that point.
There's always something. There's always somebody has a bigger stick, but you gotta plan for those characters.
Right, exactly. At that point, you're creating an assassin You're creating an assassination plan is what it comes down to. You're not playing your typical WitchBorn anymore. You're going, okay, I need to kill the spell singer on the unicorn. That's the plan at that point. So
early on, I would say the Palfrey and the Stag are only 6 gold, and don't be afraid to, if not in your initial build, within the first few games, get one. Because it can really change the way your war clan works. A little guy on a stag with a spear can be much tougher than you think.
Right, exactly. So, Corey, we actually went over quite a bit on this one, but again, there was a lot to cover because the elves are so unique compared to the other war clans. Is there anything else that we missed? I feel like we covered pretty much everything.
The only thing that I would say is a key skill of the elves that we didn't touch on is Plant Singer.
Yes.
And, people tend to go, oh, why do I want a Plant Singer? And before long, they have 5. Because what that allows you to do is create key herbs that you need for the game in the aftermath of every game. So you're not buying these things. And one of the biggest ones that you initially want is one called Mauve Hypernicum. So when your arm does get lopped off, rather than missing next game, you apply the Mauve Hypernicum and you're ready for next game. So don't overlook it. It's a huge, huge win for the elves. It's a skill you got to take.
Yeah.
It's not sexy, it's not glamorous, but it is going to make your war clan go from pretty good to great.
Yeah, especially when elves can pop back like that.
Yeah. You don't want to be going into games down elves if you can at all avoid it. You want to be, full strength every game.
Right. Well, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of Raising the Witchborn, and we will see you next week with The Guild.